In terms of this Pro-Intersectionality Conference, I've said that I'm going to come as a student and not as a teacher or a lecturer, because I see myself as rather peripheral in terms of this issue, in the sense that intersectionality means, at least for me, that other voices should prevail. So people of colour and others should prevail over my white, male, heterosexual voice, which is the point of it, in a way. It was, as Tim Barford has said in podcasts and such like, in the run-up to the conference, quite an issue within intersectionality. So that's just to be said as a kind of general point about who should be the voices of intersectionality. And, of course, white men get to be the voice of just about everything. As we know, the animal advocacy movement is made up mainly of women. So that's an interesting one. When I started, I became a vegan in 1979, but when I started, there were a lot of what you might call female prime movers in the movement. Margaret Manzoni, Paddy Broughton, Jean Pink formed Animal Aid, quite a lot of that. So it wasn't such a big issue. I think really if you look at the corporate animal advocacy world now, or the animal welfare group now, overwhelmingly led by male men, there's an issue there, you know. Obviously there's Ingrid Newkirk, but that is a weird case in intersectionality terms, in the sense that Peter is a disgrace, but we'll come on to that. Okay. So my learning about intersectionality and the reason I'm here really, I suppose, is the fact that I've always been into this idea of the overlapping, intersecting, intertwined oppressions. And my first experience of that, I guess, was when I was teaching feminism at a basic sociological level to largely Asian students, which was quite interesting. The Japanese female students really got into feminism and really loved it. The Japanese men were threatened by it, as you might imagine. And then when the Chinese students came, that gender division was marked even more. A lot of the female students were really into feminism, and a lot of the guys, because we were getting some elite people, as it were, from China at first in terms of students. Some of the guys were well threatened by feminism, so that was quite an interesting thing. But what we would do when we talked about feminism, we would talk about liberals and Marxists and radicals, separatists sometimes, and then, of course, we would talk about the rise of the black feminists, who had a problem with the way that feminism was being expressed and articulated within the white community. And several of the very kind of first wave feminists, you might argue, were kind of fairly wealthy white women who had black women slaves, so there was a real kind of big issue in the way it worked. And then it was realized that these, AFCO puts it well, rather than issues that affected people on an intersectional level being added up together, it was more than that. So AFCO talks about it's wrong to layer them. And so it's expressed this way. Say, for example, someone is a person of color, someone is black, someone is in poverty, and someone is female. All of those are intersectional issues. But it's not that they are plus each other. It's not black plus poverty plus female. It's times, because they amplify each other. And this is a point that Patrice Jones makes in that video there. If you go onto YouTube and put that title in YouTube, you'll get Patrice Jones talking about that. One of the great things, just so I can kind of make a movement point, I'm critical of this movement going after the mainstream, because the mainstream is where all the sexists and racists are. And it's the mainstream that, the Peters and all that want to try and get to. But what Patrice Jones says right at the end of this film, and it's about 18 minutes long, not too long, is that we assume that the mainstream means the most, the majority. Whereas if you look at the conglomeration, as it were, of all the oppressed people, they are numerically the most, And there is something wrong about a movement for justice that goes after the mainstream who have a very poor understanding of justice. Whereas by going after those people, we alienate those people we should be making alliances with, other justice movements, other radicals, other progressives, whatever kind of phrase you want to use. There is a kind of fundamental tactical problem within this movement there, that we go for the wrong people all the time. It's really odd that we would do it, Okay, so here are some ideas which express kind of intersectional principles. And in fact, again, in the Patrice Jones film that I mentioned, she also mentions the logic of domination. And so this is Val Plumwood. And this concept you can trace back into the 1950s, in fact. So intersectionality itself is not, a new idea. It is based on other things. And Kimberly Crenshaw, who coined the phrase, because it's been a little bit controversial within the animal rights movement. It's been, it's got a lot of debate in academic terms. But Crenshaw did say that she expected it to be used wider and in elsewhere than how she used it, which is a specific kind of black feminist legal kind of framework where she was coming from. She expected it to be used elsewhere. So there is some talk about whether intersectionality is being appropriated by an event such as this. But I think that's probably wrong. All ideas evolve, It's why we get neo-Marxism and all the rest of it. So, there's that. So entanglements of oppression and liberation, you may recognize that phrase as the work of David Nybert. And the book that comes from is a book which is called Animal Rights, Human Rights, and then Entanglements of Oppression and Liberation. It's a very good book. I highly recommend it. All the work of David Nybert I recommend. And if you go to my website, which is called, I can't remember the name, Human Relations with Other Sentient Beings, on Human Relations with Other Sentient Beings, you can hear a recent speech that Nybert talked about. He basically talks about the entanglements, and he's one of those people who argue that we can't get veganism at the same time as having capitalism, which is quite an interesting, again, another kind of attack on the mainstream, if you like. Alliance politics and total liberation. These ideas come from Steve Best. And alliance politics is an interesting one because Best argues that whether we like it or not, we are a left-wing movement, which is a very controversial thing to say within the animal rights movement, because if you look at the demographics of the animal advocacy movement, it tends to be quite bourgeois, quite middle class, and quite white. And so there's a lot of pushback. If you say this is a left-wing movement, what he's actually saying is our values are left-wing. They're not right-wing, And so he thinks, and I agree with this, and also Bob Torres, would argue that if we are seeking alliances with other oppressed groups or other groups that are representing oppressed groups, then we should be looking at the left. And again, those are the very people who are alienated by our movement. They think we're shallow. They think we don't make sense. They think that we are sexist and racist. We've got fascists in the movement. All of this is true. We are a social justice movement. There is no place for racists and fascists and sexists, but they're everywhere in this movement. And I'll tell you what, those people speaking elsewhere here in this conference, those people of color, those black people, black vegans rock and all that, eventually they're going to want us as white allies to stand shoulder to shoulder with them against the racists in the movement. And we're then going to have to make a choice because we tolerate them at the moment. We tolerate all kinds of stuff at the moment. Total liberation, another kind of idea about, the intertwined ideas. And then we are each other is actually an anarchist idea, and it comes from someone called Xavi Phoenix. I posted some podcasts by Xavi recently, and They went under a different name in those days, but you can, again, if you look at my website, you can have a look at that. And their challenge is a challenge to alliance politics, because alliance politics essentially says that we are all in these different boxes, anti-capitalist movement, the feminists, the vegans and this kind of stuff, and we make alliances, yeah? Whereas they're arguing that they don't have to make alliances with the feminist movement because they are a feminist. They don't have to make alliances with the anti-capitalist movement because they are anti-capitalist. And so by the concept of we are each other, it's as though all our values kind of merge into one. And we'll come back to that because I'm going to show you a couple of pictures of some of the VIP posters and leaflets that we've done on this issue. So just really want to go through then our main intersectionality leaflet, which is based, well, certainly for me, it's based on my learning so far in terms of intersectionality, and it was written by Xavi. And the first principle, there's 6 of them, is be consistent. The idea of questioning all hierarchies. And not just the ones that are convenient for us to do. It's important for us to take that on board, that we're looking at a wide idea. This is part and parcel of a bugbear of mine, which is the fact that we're talking about veganism, which is an expansive, radical justice movement. I know there's a lot of people in the movement who want to reduce it down to food, but veganism is not a diet, It's not about health. It's not about just our relationships with other animals either. It never has been. Veganism is a big, radical, bold idea. It was formed in 1944 when the Second World War was going on. Donald Watson, one of the co-founders, conscientious objector, saw veganism as part of the peace movement. Others, the early pioneers, saw veganism as part of the moral evolution of humanity. It's a big, radical idea, which has been, for business and other tactical reasons, neutered at the moment to make it more like a diet. We need to resist that and re-establish the wide, expansive, radical vision of veganism. Watson said that veganism was the greatest cause on earth. And I think that was an intersectional thing to say. I think he saw it as an overarching principle. I think it was a very, very big idea. And we're losing that. And we've got to fight back and retain what was radical about veganism. Again, be consistent. If you can claim to stand for non-violence, make it an everyday choice. So this is a very kind of vegan thing to say, right? But it's wider than just the food, essentially, as we'll come on to it. Again, be consistent. The end of the first one, really. Don't fight for someone's liberation in a way that hurts someone else. So, this brings me to my thing that I like to rant about, which is people for the ethical treatment of animals. I believe that they should be shut down immediately, starved of funds, closed down. This is their latest outrage. Grab a pussy. Right? This is building on the Donald Trump stuff. PETA are a disgrace, and they should be thrown away. They are not part of a justice movement. They cannot be part of a justice movement. They don't fit. Okay? We should starve them of money. There's lots of justice activists in the world. You don't have to give $1 to these sexist, racist, horrible, ableist people and campaigns. Just don't need to do it. Number 2, be a respectful ally. So this brings us into the core of intersectionality. Don't always speak for other people. Don't ever speak for other people, really. The idea is to create a space that they can speak for themselves and to be heard. And to Tim Barford's credit and to Alan Lee's credit, this is the space that they've made in London right now. And that's a great thing, and they should be congratulated for it. It's been a painful journey for them, I think, at times. Been a bit of pushback. As I said, in this so-called justice movement of ours, there's been some pushback to bringing in these justice activists. There's an issue. There's an issue. Now, this slide is not actually made for Gary Francione, but it could be, which is don't always know best and learn to listen. And that's what I'm trying to do, and that's why I value this conference, and I'm glad that every talk is being filmed so we can all catch up on the things that we missed and everything else. But don't always know best. We don't always know best. Be willing to learn. That's the thing. Think about what people are telling you. I've seen over and over again, and Xavi got involved with this, asked a prominent vegan, now a prominent vegan, a vegan strategist no less, pleaded with him not to use ableist language on Facebook. But he defended doing it. We've got a problem. Ableism is actually a tricky issue. I mean, we're getting a bit better with not calling other animals it, but it still happens. And, if you get a bit of a froth up, it comes out, But ableist language is everywhere, So people, oh, that's insane. This is crazy. These things just come out. And it is going to take a while for us to discipline ourselves to try and do something about ableist language, but it needs to be done because it hurts people. It triggers people. It takes them back to their abuse. It's something that we've got to learn. We need to learn to listen to them. And if someone says, please don't use that word, don't use it, moral schizophrenia, don't use it. There's lots of bloody words, We're not short of fucking words, So find an alternative words. I mean, they're all on the internet, There is actually kind of things, don't say this, say this, So we're not short of words. So, if somebody really pleads with you not to use it because it hurts them, causes them pain, well, why would you, So, okay, show solidarity with everyone who is oppressed. Show solidarity in your daily choices. Let no violent action or word go unchallenged. So this is the kind of idea of calling out and sometimes calling in. Calling out shouldn't be the thing that people often think it is, which is kind of like, being shouted at and everything. In some senses, you should welcome. What's going on here? Sorry. Update failed. Okay, I don't mind. We should welcome being called out in the sense that people are saying, there's a slight problem, with what you said, There's a couple of talks yesterday where people are still talking about other animals as it. We need to call that out, And that's what it is. It's kind of saying there's a problem with that kind of language, It oppresses. And, we still say, the cow that. And we should be saying the cow who, We should change the language. We should learn again from the feminists about this idea of transforming, for example, history to his story, to make a political point. It might not be grammatically correct. That doesn't matter. It's a political point that we're making. So, we should be not saying it, he and she and all that. That's the thing. The bit pointed out, I don't know if you can see that. See if you can see the red. Okay, I've got some bits on my screen. I've got some bits here. Okay, sorry. So, you must have had a gap in that other picture that said "learn to listen." Sorry, I'll read this bit out. Then this is in red on my screen, but you can't see it on your screen. As Herbert Marcuse said, solidarity is the driving power of liberation. Xavi was very influenced by a neo-Marxist philosopher called Herbert Marcuse. And that's some work that we probably need to check out. Think critically about our privileges. Another core issue in intersectionality. Ask these questions. They all apply for me, except for financially secure. But, these are real huge privileges in our society. The way that our society is structured gives you these really big privileges. And it's something that we should be aware of and take into account when we're dealing with people. We are, as it says here, in a hierarchical society as a result of these characteristics. Think about your privileges again. this is an interesting one. Because of our privileges, there are certain things that we don't have to worry about, whereas others do. You know, I remember in the 1970s, I used to be a projectionist, and I remember I used to go on the bus and walk through Derby, where I lived at the time, and there was a woman who got on the same bus, and my route was the same as hers. And eventually, I changed my route home because I was concerned all the time about, it looked like I was following her all the time, you know. So it's a kind of thing that, you know, you need to be aware of those kind of things, you know. A safe place and space for you is not necessarily the same for others. You know, it's something that we need to be aware of. And I think that's a very kind of intersectional thing. And this is the idea about the notion of, you know, just being, this is the kind of thing that Black Vegans Rock have been trying to articulate and express. You know, just because we're white in a white system, as it were, this is a problem. Makes us racist. People don't like this. It's kind of like, whoa, I'm not racist, you know. But that's not really what's kind of being said, really, saying that the system is racist. And this is like institutionalized stuff, structural points being made. But then we do obviously have consumer choices. And so this brings us to that wider thing, again, the kind of food empowerment project kind of idea. You know, it's not just about what we eat and what we wear. You know, it's about thinking about, you know, is this new vegan chocolate actually full of child slavery? Because if it is, for me, it ain't a vegan chocolate, you know? Does it involve bonded labor? Well, you know, these are big issues. I mean, even things like palm oil are issues. We know that. And I think all cash crops are a vegan issue. When you've got people starving to death and the best agricultural land in the planet are being used for tea and coffee and sugar, then that's a vegan issue, because vegans stand for justice for all. Okay, these are vegan issues. And the vegan community should be at the forefront of trying to do something about this. Now, there are some things that we all do this as vegan individuals. We do what we can. There are some structural things that we can't do, you know. I like to talk about, well, not like to talk about, but I talk about, in this sense, some of the harms that are caused by, what's that phrase now, eating vegan. Okay, and one of the images that I talk about is there is a YouTube video of one of these kind of prairies in North America, and there's like 10 or 11 of these huge, massive combine harvesters coming along, all in a big wall. The other animals in those big fields have got no chance of surviving. You know, they're going to be killed as well, you know. Now, a vegan world would do that differently. It'd probably be smaller, the farming would be smaller, more people back to land, but also we would think about things like fitting vehicles with sonic devices, or even employing people to try and clear the fields, you know, leaving some parts of the field intact for the other animals. These would be vegan principles, you know, because it wouldn't be all about profit, it'd be about justice. A vegan world would be different. So, given the fact that veganism causes harm, the way to tackle that, ironically, if you like, is we need more vegans. And the reason for that is that we need socio-economic power. And once we get that, we can then start to affect the structural harms that we as individuals now can't do much about, or anything. So that's what we need to do. We need more ethical vegans in society, or as I call it, ethical vegans equals vegans, right? We need more of those. The more ethical vegans we get in society, the better, because they are the people motivated to bring about justice in the world, okay, across the board. And if we do take on board intersectionality, that's for everyone. Everyone will be liberated in this sense. Getting near the end now. Be aware of all forms of violence. Sexist jokes are violent. Ableist and racist attitudes are violent. Be aware of the violence in the language you use, the products you buy, your assumptions about others, your relationships with them. Power relations, When we are in relations with others, these are power relations, And Patrice Jones talked about, well, sometimes we have it and sometimes they have it, which is all true. But, when we have it, then that creates great responsibility, and we should use it very wisely and in a way that doesn't cause harm, if possible. Kind of, if you like, this is one of the questions that came up in Brennan. Is it okay if you're a privileged person to use your privilege, as it were, to aid liberation? And I said, well, obviously yes, but again, you'd have to do it very reflexively. You'd have to do it in a way that really, you think about it. This is like a movement part. Justice doesn't end or even really begin with putting money in a collection box, signing a petition, or attending one protest. I don't fully agree with this one, in the sense that if this is talking about passive vegans, I don't mind passive vegans. I know a lot of activists do. I don't mind passive vegans because I think they're kind of challenging the system every time they buy anything and every time they eat and everything. What I want passive vegans to do is stop giving money to already rich groups and give it to the grassroots who are starving and do a better job than the already rich groups. That's the thing that I want them to do. So it's not that they're passive and just give money and put a collection. It's where the money goes. I don't understand it. It's almost like there's two people begging on the street. One is rich and one is poor, and you give your money to the rich person. Why would you? That doesn't make any sense to me. The grassroots are the backbone of every social movement, and the grassroots, relatively speaking, are starving. The rich groups, just bring it in. All goes on wages. And worst of all, it goes on duplication. We waste thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds every year on duplication in this movement. All that money could go to the grassroots. And then this is getting to the end, as I said. I'll read it out again because of the thing that's in red. So if you've got a PowerPoint coming up later on, don't have anything in red, obviously. Justice begins in your home as well as in the streets, in your town as well as far away war zones. And that kind of means things like food, not bombs, and those kind of issues, those kind of things. And then it says here, the expansive vision of peace that is veganism is limitless, and it begins with you. And this is where all this is said. This is the VIP leaflet, and this is deliberately zine style. Zavi is a genderqueer, radical feminist, straight edge vegan, but they're also dyslexic and issues like that. And so we didn't correct any language. Why would we? Okay, it's understandable, it makes sense, and it looks good. And for all those people who do street outreach, some people say, oh, you've got to make your leaflets look professional. No, don't. In fact, people are a bit bored by professional-looking leaflets now. They're bloody everywhere, and they all look the same, and it looks like a corporation. Here's one from Animal Aid, and here's one from McDonald's. What's the difference? Okay. These make a difference, and people do come up to us and say, oh, yeah, I remember these from the 80s. This is great. This is like, feminist zines and all that. And we actually do make the proper zines, which are the folded ones with the cut. You can twist them the other way around and all that. So this is the back end of that. Almost done now. A couple more. This is one of our posters. Okay. And so this is, again, trying to express intersectionality in the sense that we're talking about the interlinks and the commonalities of oppression. And this, again, by Zavi, we must fight for everyone or we will liberate no one. I think it is a real truism that we are not going to do it piece by piece, I don't think. I think we do need to do the hard work of making those alliances, or if you like, becoming each other, and we need to, progress from there. And then finally, I think this is the final one. This is bits I wanted to point out, just two little bits. I'm not going to read all this out. But it says at the top, again in red, intersectionality is not a movement. So this is what Zavi said in the podcast that posted, that intersectionality is a revolutionary tool, a new way of examining oppressions that we face and are fighting against. Intersectionality is not a movement, it's a tool for examining our movement, a new way of understanding the privileges and oppressions we experience in our lives in a very complex and interconnected way. And then finally from me, this bottom part here, which might have some contentious lines, I'm not sure. But it says here, acknowledging that harmful actions cannot be vegan no matter who they hurt. We cannot have partial revolution, or revolution in stages, or revolution in isolated parts. To fight for the liberation of one oppressed peoples while taking part in the oppression of others makes liberation for anyone impossible. An intersectional understanding of veganism means an end to selective compassion and to indifference to suffering. It means everyone matters equally, and everyone's struggle for freedom is our struggle, i.e., and that doesn't actually say this, this is my little note at the end, i.e., we can be each other in that sense of understanding. Thanks a lot.